Accidents aren't the only problem facing Taiwan's military. It's still waiting for the delivery of over $23 billion in weapons from the U.S. Our reporter Jaime Ocon talked with Heritage Foundation security analyst Alex Velez-Green about this delay.
There's almost $23 billion worth of weapons and equipment that hasn't been delivered to Taiwan yet. And some have said that's because of the war in Ukraine, and others have said that's because of the pandemic, and also just logistical issues within the U.S. industrial base. But do we know the actual reason for why Taiwan hasn't seen delivery of these weapons?
There is a substantial backlog that's in large part due to constraints on U.S. production capacity. We just don't have the ability to produce as many weapons as quickly as, frankly, we need to. And that's been exacerbated by a lot of the things you just mentioned, the pandemic, some of those supply chain issues. Certainly the war in Ukraine has taxed existing production far more than many folks expected. So for all those reasons, the backlog has been exacerbated. Although I think, as you sort of alluded to in your question, it's been around for quite a while. This is not a new problem, but the urgency of dealing with it, it has only grown. And now I would say it's actually extremely urgent, particularly when we think about Taiwan.
From my understanding, the weapons that Ukraine is getting are from existing stockpiles, and the weapons that Taiwan is getting are from brand new production lines. Given those two separate production lines, why is there overlap, and why is there sort of conversation between a competition for Ukraine and Taiwan to get these weapons?
The fact is that, when we think about the weapons that Taiwan needs, many of them, first of all, are the same or very similar weapons to what Ukraine needs and has often received. And just from a sourcing perspective, many of those exist in U.S. stockpiles now, in many cases, at far lower levels because of how much we've sent to Ukraine. But many of the weapons that Taiwan needs can come from U.S. stockpiles, and the administration is finally just starting to take advantage of that. Many will also need to be produced new. Some of those are weapons that may be sort of specific to Taiwan. Many are not, candidly. But the fact is, from where I sit, the ability of the United States and Taiwan collectively to deter, or for that matter, defeat a Chinese invasion in the next several years is at best questionable today. That wasn't true to the same extent even just 4 years ago. The question you're asking in terms of sourcing and getting these weapons to Taiwan is exactly the right question. The answer is we should be taking weapons from whatever sources available and moving them to Taiwan as quickly as possible. That's from U.S. inventories or new production.
While Taiwan waits for these $23 billion worth of weapons, is there anything that Taiwan should be doing right now, or any sort of capability that Taiwan should be looking towards instead while it waits for these weapons?
Taiwan should speak up when the weapons that it needs, it sees going to other places instead of to Taiwan. It doesn't need to sort of engage in sort of diplomatic tit for tats or anything like that, but it's important that Taiwan speak up for itself and what it needs. But on that particular note, Taiwan needs to invest in the right capabilities. It is not a new thing that Taiwan needs to invest in certain what are called asymmetric defense capabilities, the kinds of weapons that can be fielded. They're relatively cheap on an individual level. They can be fielded in relatively large numbers. They're survivable. They're mobile, anti-ship missiles, air and missile defenses, anti-tank weapons, these kinds of things. The Taiwan Ministry of National Defense has not historically prioritized these. It's starting to, but it's late to the game, and it needs to do that far more aggressively than it has.
That was Heritage Foundation security analyst Alex Velez-Green speaking to our reporter Jaime Ocon.